Welcome to TNS Horizon 2022. I'm Mike Keegan, Chief Executive Officer of Transaction Network Services. Thank you for joining our first ever Global Payments Conference. It is great to see so many of our customers, and I'm delighted that many other stakeholders from the wider payments ecosystem have also joined. We're excited to bring everyone together to share our vision for the future of payments and what that vision means for all industry participants. Today, we are going to reimagine the future of payments, and I'm confident that you will leave with actionable information that will help your business and the industry continue to meet the ever-changing needs of the modern-day consumer. Before we look to the future, let me take a moment to give a little background on TNS. Since our inception over 30 years ago, we have gained a sound reputation based on trust, reliability, and service excellence for transporting mission-critical information for our customers. We now have offices on 5 continents and customers in 60 countries. We are privileged to work with some of the largest global brands, as well as a diverse range of innovative companies that are pushing the boundaries of the customer experience today, and who rely on TNS to securely accept, transport, and deliver their transactions. Our global footprint and our network resilience, security, and uptime are industry leading. This and our resulting experience have attracted a broad mix of leaders to this conference who are bringing their expertise to share with us today. Our ambition for this conference is help you to learn it, plan it, and ultimately own it. I hope that you enjoy the next 90 minutes or so of discussion, debate, and insight from the panelists. I would now like to pass the baton to John Tait, TNS's Global Managing Director for the payments market, to introduce today's program. John will also moderate the keynote session, Pushing the Boundaries of Customer Payments, Strategic Approaches to Addressing the 5G Gamechanger. John?
Thanks very much, Mike, and a very warm welcome to everyone to Transaction Network Services Horizon 2022 virtual conference from myself and the broader TNS team that is on the line with me today. I want to thank everyone for joining. We're very lucky to have a true global audience with attendees across the globe, including from North America, continental Europe, UK, Ireland, and Asia Pacific. So a warm welcome to everybody. Just as a starting point, as a general introduction to the program, over the next 90 minutes or so, we're hoping to explore new trends, talk about what is next in payments and how businesses can prepare to embrace these trends. And we have specifically 4 sessions lined up for you. And we'll kick off with the keynote panel session, which is all about taking a deeper dive into the strategic approaches to address the 5G game changer. And specifically, we want to look at the current state of where 5G is at in the world today, how we think and the panelists think that 5G will certainly change consumer behavior and some of the trends that we're seeing now versus what we think will happen into the future. We'll talk a little bit about how 5G is going to enable a much smarter connected world on the back of the evolution of 4G and some of the technology advances that we've seen coming out of that. We will touch on some of the challenges and complexities. It's not going to be all smooth sailing, so we do expect to see some challenges, and we want to talk a little bit about that. And then we'll finish up with a discussion around what we see as the next big thing from the technology heading in the market and specifically around payments and some of the things that we may see relative to consumers. So we'll focus on that for the next 45 minutes, and then following that, we'll take a 10-minute break, and then we have 3 breakout sessions. One which will talk about some key payment trends that we've seen across the marketplace. Secondly, we will undertake a case study on a digital transformation with Z Energy out of New Zealand. And finally, we will have a session that is very focused on some critical updates relative to all of our obligations in the PCI DSS compliance space. And we have 3 colleagues of mine that will be hosting those sessions individually straight after this session. Also, at the conclusion of today, we have an exhibition hall where you can chat to the TNS team and learn more about our products, our solutions, and some of the services that we take to market. And finally, just from a housekeeping standpoint, after the event today, the recordings will be made available to you and to everybody that has registered. So a very warm welcome to you all again, and thank you very much for the time. I'm going to change gears a little bit now, if I may, and I'm just going to spend a little bit of time very briefly introducing to you who TNS is. I know that there's many on the call that have been business friends with us for a long period of time, but there's some people that are new faces to us. So for those of you, as a refresher, our business is centered around managing infrastructure as a service. We focus on delivering highly secure, scalable, and proven infrastructure as a service in the payment space. And specifically, what we do is we enable retailers and merchants to accept a payment, whether that's through a point of sale device, whether it's through a parking platform, whether it's through an online app, or whether it's through an e-commerce gateway, or anything in between, including ATMs and other acceptance devices. We give our clients an ability to accept the payment through the solutions that we take to market. We then enable our clients to connect the payment, and whether that's connections at a device, specifically where we're connecting payments out of ATMs or point of sale devices or online websites, whether it's an ability to connect to the edge for large retailers using all types of different connectivity mediums. We enable people to connect those transactions and send them back to a host where they are cleared, acquired, and settled by a third party. And lastly, we give our clients ability to orchestrate a payment. So whether that's payment processing, whether it's managing the infrastructure that supports payment processing, we take that to market as a service that's delivered 24/7, 365 days a year, and as Mike said, covers 60 markets across the globe. So we connect, we accept, and we orchestrate payments for our customers. If I sort of move out of that and just talk a little bit before we jump into the keynote of how we see the key trends that are influencing our business in the marketplace today, and some of the things that we think about relative to the solutions and the services that we take to market. I guess at the highest level, we see 8 key things that are certainly evolving and emerging our strategy relative to the products and services that we have. The first thing that we see is that we definitely see that there's a change coming in the point of sale environment. We're seeing that payment terminals are slowly dematerializing as hardware solutions shift to API-based cloud solutions. The second thing that we're seeing is the adoption of POS solutions, which is really following an evolution that we feel came out of the US market, where business management solutions and payment services are becoming more bundled, robust, and easy to use. So you're seeing the integration of and the adoption of POS solutions coming together more effectively than what they necessarily were 5, 10, 15 years ago. We see a continued shift to the integration of POS and API systems, where technology and service providers are serving brick and mortar, are positioning themselves to thrive within an integrated services ecosystem. So it's now a lot more about streamlining and the broader activities that come off the acceptance of payments. We see, fourthly, a growing need of omni-channel solutions. So there's no doubt that the omni-channel experience must permeate across all aspects of a retailer as consumers look for a singular experience relative to the way in which they want to interact, make, and process payments. We continue to see the rise in the importance of alternative payment methods, whether these are global in nature, regional, or more local. We're seeing more and more of these local payment methods expanding from single to omni-channel enablement. Big part of our discussion today is the sixth trend that we see, which is the deployment of 5G networks and the expansion of cloud computing. And in particular on 5G networks, we see that they're poised to change the proliferation and the use of digital solutions globally. Lastly, we see 2 last things for us. We see a continued focus on security, and network tokenization is expanding, and it's augmenting the value of payment tokens while delivering reliable, secure payments infrastructure. And we talk a lot about the security aspects on our PCI breakout session later today. And then lastly for us, we see the emergence of payment orchestration, the need and the complexity in taking a payment for a merchant or a retailer and being able to process those across multiple channels, multiple geographies, and multiple payment types has become more and more complex. And we see that orchestration is emerging as a preferred model for streamlining connectivity, data, and transaction management. So for us across the globe, from our vantage point, we sort of see those 8 key trends coming together and influencing some of the things that we need to give consideration to as we continue to push into making payments secure and always available for the consumer. Lastly, before we jump down into the keynote, one of the things that we got some feedback from the participants today was to provide some insights into what we've seen from a trends perspective relative to the global pandemic and how that's played out. So I thought I'd share some statistics with you just briefly. Across the globe, we process around 34 billion transactions a year. We sort of undersit the payments industry from a fabric standpoint, where we're sitting in the background moving these payment transactions all around the world. And pre-pandemic, we were processing around 650 million transactions a week. And really, if you go back over the last 2 years or just under 2 years, from February 2023, pre-pandemic, we were processing around 650 million transactions a week across our network. And sort of on the 23rd of February, we had our first, 23rd of February 2020, we had our first lockdowns hit. And they hit across the globe fairly consistently from a timing standpoint. And what we saw was the transaction volumes dropped from that high of 650 almost immediately down to 470 million transactions a week. And we saw them then gradually recover through to August 2020 was the trend that we saw. Then in late April, early May, we saw the impact of the Delta variant, and transactions dipped, but recovered really quickly in June, July of that same year. And in November of 2021, just late last year, Delta hit us. And we really didn't see a sharp decline in transaction volumes as transactions continued to grow. But what we did see is we saw through the back end of that a general shift in the channel from POS to online. And we saw that early in the pandemic, but now we're actually seeing that traffic shift back and some of it returning back to POS. Not yet at the same levels, but there's certainly a shift back. And then lastly, if I sort of delve down into the segments that we support, and I know that there's a number of organisations represented today from the parking segment globally, where we provide a lot of services and support to that industry. We've seen our parking segment the hardest hit of all, with the volumes in the parking sector globally still transacting at about 50% of pre-pandemic volumes. And that's starting to grow back now, but as travel continues to be interrupted, we're still seeing the impact of that. So we're seeing some interesting trends in our own transaction volumes that I thought that I'd share those with you today. So I hope you find that useful. And with that, I wanted to now sort of introduce our first session of the day from a keynote perspective, and take an opportunity to sort of step back and reflect on the emergence of 5G. So if we sort of look at it for where we sit today in 2022, what we've seen is that the shift to mobility has clearly influenced and shaped the underlying forces driving digital payments over the past 15 years. We've seen a move from the desktop to the consumer pocket in recent times, and we've seen 4G massively accelerate the shift to mobile and digital. And with that, we saw the shift for many consumers where mobile payments become the default setting for things like ride-hailing services, food delivery, music downloads, and other digital commerce experiences. We feel, and the panel is going to talk a lot about this today, that 5G is similarly poised to change the business and technology of payments. We think that there's going to be greater levels of connectivity, and a real-time access to online services will change the way we think about the distinction between digital and physical experiences, interactions, and connectivity needs. But as we know, 5G has been a buzzword for quite a while now, so we thought it would be good to start the conference with a session that will explore 5G as a game changer. What does it really mean for businesses and consumers? What is its role in payments and technology? And how can we embrace it to better serve all those that are involved in our ecosystem? Joining me today on the panel, I have Nick from Juniper Research. I have Saravan from AWS, and I have Dan Lyman from TNS. So I'd actually like to welcome them to the panel and go around the grounds and ask them to introduce themselves. So I may start with you, Nick, if you don't mind.
Great, thanks very much, John, and great to be here. Thanks for inviting me. So I'm head of research here at Juniper Research. We're a market research house in the UK that focuses on digital technology markets. We've written pretty extensively about payments and about 5G. So yeah, should be a great session. Looking forward to discussing it with you all.
Thanks, Nick. And Saravan?
Thank you, John. I have to say I'm pretty excited to be part of the panel, sharing with Dan and Nick on this. I am a solutions architect, a global lead solutions architect with AWS, working on edge computing technologies, helping customers in their journey of edge computing and cloudification. And thanks for the opportunity to be here and share some of our experiences, what AWS is doing in the space, especially around edge computing and 5G, and how dramatically the industry is going to embrace 5G and edge computing for next generation applications, especially in the payment industries and others. Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you so much for joining. And Dan Lyman.
Thanks, John. Looking forward to the session. My name is Dan Lyman. I've been around TNS for just over 20 years in a variety of roles. I joined the company in our communications market business and have been in a number of different, sales, business development, and now I head up our global product management practice working for John.
Sorry about that, Dan. Okay, so thanks very much, everyone, and welcome again. We might jump straight into it, and just if I can commence by just sort of getting perspectives from each of you on, 5G is really starting to take shape. I now believe that it's live in about 50 countries across the globe, and it's becoming more and more of a game changer relative to some of the things that we're hearing and talking about. But from your perspectives and your vantage points, maybe starting with you, Saravan, where do you see the world at now in relation to 5G?
Thanks, John. Certainly, we can share my experience around 5G and where 5G is around the world. Just as a starter, 5G is not just an evolutionary technology. It is a revolutionary technology in which how the architecture is evolving, not just from the end user perspective, even from an operator standpoint. 5G is massively revolutionary, starting from the radio network, starting to how 5G networks are built and how they are managed and how they are orchestrated, and all the way to enabling applications to really leverage the power of 5G. So there is massive amount of investment being made in every aspect of building and securing and really getting 5G networks ready for that next revolutionary architecture evolution. And how most importantly, what I would like to say about 5G is how it has changed the way 5G networks can be deployed with the advent of ORAN, where it is massively distributed, with the advent of containerization of the packet core, and how you can actually deploy very seamlessly, elastically secured networks in a span of few minutes, rather than waiting for days and days to really even weeks and months when a carrier really deploys the backend side of the 5G network. And finally, also most importantly, not just it's about the network, it's about how the network is going to really enable lots of innovative use cases and lots of innovative workloads to really bring about a complete change in the customer behavior, a complete change in the aspect of how these networks can be used by applications to drive monetizations for retailers, for industries and enterprises, and more importantly, really help our carriers who are actually being seen as network providers. Now there are no more network providers, a lot of value added services that can be added on top of 5G networks. To answer your questions around where the world is, certainly different countries are in different journey in terms of auctioning of the spectrum, for example, right? In some part of the countries or in some part of the world. In some countries, like there are standalone networks and non-standalone networks, which is again aspect of how you deploy 5G networks. The real value and the real meat of 5G network is slowly getting there, where carriers are moving from a non-standalone to a standalone network, which provides the full benefit of it. Some countries are auctioning new spectrum In the US, you might have heard about how Verizon and AT&T is actually going into the C-band spectrum, adding more capacity in the air so that more data can be transported over the air. And in other parts of the world, like India, they're actually starting to do some analysis on what the spectrum is going to be available for countries or carriers to deploy 5G networks. So there is, all in all, different parts of the world is in different stages of their journey. But when we get to a point in the next few years when the baseline 5G networks is available, is omnipresent, it is actually really accessible to billions of devices, there are going to be a lot of tremendous amount of opportunities and applications that is going to be written for 5G. So pretty excited about the opportunities that everybody has in the 5G space, and we are slowly moving towards that aspect of the 5G networks.
Great, thank you. Nick or Dan, anything you'd like to add to that from your vantage points of where you're seeing 5G at the moment?
I think from my perspective, John, I think, Saravan and covered most of it, but I think it's still in its infancy. And as he indicated, I think a lot of the network deployments today are still, they are not standalone. They are, hybrid deployments with, some have 4G at the core, 5G over the air. And I don't think that we'll see the full opportunity for the use cases, the innovation and the use cases that will develop when we do have standalone 5G networks end to end. So I think, over time, we'll definitely see the innovation and much greater use cases as the 5G network is built out end to end.
Thanks, Dan. I think what we'll see at a consumer behavior level, and Nick, I might ask you to give us a view on this in a moment, but what we're definitely going to see is that 5G will expand the notion of what is possible and expected before, during, and after a payment transaction. We'll see that, the higher speed, always on connections will give consumer much more choices. They'll give them better access to information, and it will probably even give them personalized content all at their fingertips through a mobile device. We'll also see that machines and devices and objects will actively participate in transactions, and in-store experiences will transcend the four walls of the shop, and digital transactions will move outside of the living room, and they'll become more normal where you're able to access them digitally. So from sort of an evolution standpoint of where we are today and the impact on consumer behavior, I might go to you first, Nick. Is there any thoughts that you've got on how you see 5G impacting the consumer behavior processes?
Sure. Thanks very much. So, firstly, I'd just like to echo what the other speakers said in terms of, obviously, we're not at a complete even rollout of 5G at this stage in terms of geographically and in terms of capabilities, so standalone versus non-standalone and some of those elements. So it's difficult to talk about one 5G at the moment. So I think that's important to know. But in terms of consumer behavior, I think we are really at the start of the journey in terms of this. So when you look at 5G and the capabilities that it enables, really, as you mentioned, there are so many great use cases for how this can evolve. I mean, what we'll see in terms of consumer behavior is easier and quicker access to content, new use cases enabled by it. So elements such as autonomous vehicles are highly reliant on 5G as a concept to really make them successful. So ultimately what you'll have is that all of these different elements, such as augmented reality, the metaverse, these sorts of, all of these new capabilities from a consumer point of view, 5G is sort of the ingredient that actually completes the picture in terms of making these happen. So what we'll see is, in terms of consumer behavior, we'll see a gradual shift as the supporting infrastructure and the business models are in place towards some of these more advanced use cases. Specifically in payments, I think what we'll see is that the consumer will want to pay where they are being active. So say they're in an autonomous vehicle, they may be consuming content through that autonomous vehicle. Now they're not having to focus on actively, watching the road. So there's new models there and new consumer behavior shifts present in that space. It could be that they can access more content on the go. And that is, again, a different way to monetize. But in store, I think as well, in terms of consumer behavior, we're going to see a shift here. I'm sure we'll come on to it, but 5G is massive for IoT enablement and enabling an absolute plethora of sensors and elements of automation and personalization to be brought into the customer experience. So really what that means is, if you're considering something like the Amazon Go model, for example, invisible payments, just walk out technologies, all of those are closer to realization with the advent of 5G. So as those capabilities grow, I think we're really going to see some progress made there, and consumer behavior will shift as they get used to these new technologies and these new capabilities being on stream.
Yeah, I would just to add to Nick's point around consumer behavior and how consumer behavior would dramatically improve and change with 5G implementation. Thanks for referring to that Amazon Go example, Nick. Super Bowl just completed on last Sunday, and the amount of technology that went into Super Bowl, where 5G is predominantly as such an important aspect, was very important to mention as far as this call is concerned. We have several use cases and several different functions of 5G which can actually tremendously improve how the user experience inside the stadium is completely changing. Crowd management is an example that I can talk about, where there is a lot of sensors and a lot of radars and lidars being embedded in all these stadiums, looking at how the crowd is moving, looking at how to manage the crowd effectively using 5G technologies, looking at real-time data statistics, which is coming out of all these sensors, and how to really provide that seamless experience to the users who are actually coming into the stadium, right? How to actually help them navigate into their seat, right? We have a very interesting use case that a lot of our partners are working on with 5G and edge computing, is how to really provide them an experience from walking right from outside the stadium all the way into their seat, navigating them in like step by step without any discomfort for them to go to, and also really navigate them to the nearest bathroom, which is like not many people are there standing in a queue. Think about a Super Bowl inside a stadium with 70,000 fans. There might be a restroom around the corner, which is free, but there might be tens of people waiting in a restroom. But with 5G, advent of 5G and real-time data analytics at the edge of the network, and how to really do crowd management is a very important aspect for safety and security, as well as for real-time experience for the fans. And also Nick touched upon immersive user experience. We are looking at providing next generation immersive experience with real-time stats being overlaid on top of what viewers are watching inside the stadium with AR, VR technologies, is dramatically changing the experience of customers coming inside the stadium. Is one massive example that I can talk about. And as we all know, 5G is, as we talked about, the panel talked about, 5G is still new. It is in its infancy stage. But there are places where 5G is already making some massive improvement, especially when there's not much of mobility required inside a stadium, where you can actually have a static 5G network where customers are not moving at a pretty fast pace. You can have massive amount of DAS units with a lot of capacity. Obviously, the stadiums are wired for a lot of capacity, expecting 70,000 fans and a lot of equipments and gears coming into the stadium. There are use cases which is really taking advantage of that infrastructure, and slowly it will come out of the stadium into every aspect of our life, making customer experience much more easier and much more interesting as 5G and all these use cases evolve.
Yeah, thanks, Saravan. And I think that's really important. Across our attendees today, we've got a range of sectors that are sort of represented, from retail to banking to parking, self-service, and financial institutions. And I think the sort of themes that I'm hearing that will have an impact on these sectors based on the introduction or explosion of 5G is that It's definitely no doubt that the predictable outcome is going to be the growth in acceptance locations for a consumer. It's going to be more sort of locations that are connected. And we've seen that explode over the last 5 years with digital payment acceptance moving, and that's certainly going to continue. I think the second thing that you're saying that I definitely agree with is we should expect to see a similar explosion in the number of devices and objects that are fitted with connected sensors. And those sensors will be able to provide information about devices, users, environmental conditions, and all sorts of other stuff in wherever they sit. And that will sort of result in a sort of a remote web of nerve endings being established for cloud and edge-based solutions that will inform, enhance, and initiate payment experiences. So I think we're definitely going to see a lot of that. We're going to see merchants, they'll gain a lot more flexibility to rethink how, when and where customer interactions are undertaken. And Nick touched on, how that will shift for the consumer wanting to be active, for example, in the autonomous vehicle. And then finally, I think the other thing that we've touched on a little bit is we'll see some permission connections, which will provide merchants with underlying insights to deliver a more personalised service to a consumer at those relevant transaction moments, which will really change the way we think about consumer engagement before and after a payment transaction. So there's a lot to sort of digest in. I think what Nick and Saravan have just sort of covered, those sort of four things are what we're going to see some alternative thinking about as we sort of evolve this. Dan, I know from your perspective, you had a view on how this may change and impact elements of payment security. Do you want to maybe just touch on that for the panel and the broader audience?
Yeah, thanks, John. I think, again, the technology leap that 5G offers is transformational. So, you have now the capability to combine applications, can combine edge computing with cloud computing with the capacity, speed, and low latency that 5G offers. And I think that just presents all kinds of opportunities for immersive experiences for consumers in payments, but also with security, the ability to do a lot of processing on biometric data or other data that you're collecting from a point of interaction with a consumer. And I think consumers will ultimately drive, this is a technology platform that, as we said, is in its infancy. Consumers will, there's a lot of clever people out there, a lot of innovation, and this just provides a transformational platform for that innovation. And you look at things that we've just experienced in the last couple of years with the pandemic and all of the innovation around, curbside pickup, curbside delivery, pay at the, being able to do contactless payments, all of the things that really were driven at high speed by consumers that needed a different experience. I think when you have the capabilities that 5G offers, you're just going to see a lot of that, and the market's going to iterate and develop as as the capabilities become more and more mature.
Yeah, great, fabulous. Thanks, Dan. I want to just change it up a little bit from the technology and the use cases to talk a little bit more about the economics and how you can potentially create value for your own businesses out of 5G. And I know, Nick, that you've recently written a paper relative to how you can monetize the 5G space. Do you want to give us a little bit of insight and colour into your findings there in your research document and how you sort of see the capability for us to monetize the benefit of 5G?
Yeah, sure, absolutely. I think what is important to say is that 5G is a platform. Ultimately, 5G is a platform that enables other things. It enables them very well, but it's a platform. So you have to figure out how you use that platform. I think from a monetization point of view, it's firstly about getting to sort of an equal level of service in terms of bringing in sort of standalone features to 5G networks, which makes it a lot easier to introduce sort of value-added services such as network slicing, which is very important. But in terms of sort of how to monetize it in a practical environment, it really depends on the business. And I think what we see with any technology that's deployed is that it needs to solve a specific problem at a specific business. And I think this is where we fall down a lot with technology deployment and sort of leveraging new technologies to the greatest extent. Is really understanding the problem and then using the right solution to fix that. 5G is a gateway to loads of different capabilities. We've got edge computing that is massive. It has massive implications throughout payments, throughout banking, throughout all sorts of industries. We've got loads and loads of other use cases that are enabled by this. So really, it's about looking to what you want that user experience to be. What do you want the user to see when they come to your services? And how then you can apply 5G technologies to make that happen. And it's in terms of leveraging those new capabilities in personalization, understanding what the touch points are, how users, in the stadium example we've already talked about, how a user's journey through that stadium works and how you can make that journey much easier to make, and how you can make that a much more informed process. So in terms of monetizing 5G, it's really about understanding the specific benefits that 5G can have to those businesses, and then really applying them in practice in terms of designing a superior user experience, offering services that you've not been able to offer before, and creating new revenue streams, such as in the example of content consumed in autonomous vehicles, like we discussed earlier, or augmented reality, or the metaverse, really about enabling new services. So it's really a mix of those elements is how you go about monetizing that. But it's a massive platform for so many different capabilities. There will be an endless number of ways that businesses can drive value and really improve elements of the user experience. So it's a really exciting time to be talking about this market.
Yeah, I agree with that. And Dan and Saravan, and do you see sort of anything sort of top of mind that 5G enables or opens up for businesses on the back of what sort of Nick's just touched on? Any perspectives from yourselves that you think are relevant to call out?
Yeah, certainly I can jump in. I do agree. It's a platform, and every enterprises and customers around the globe are actually looking at how to leverage that platform to monetize and actually give better user experience for their customers. If you certainly provide better user for the customer, you're certainly monetizing through the platform. 5G on one spectrum, most of the people look at 5G as, oh, it's 100 times more speed and latency in the sub 10 millisecond, right? So these are important key aspect of the network itself, but that's the key underlying foundation of 5G network is brings more devices to the network. It brings more data capabilities to the devices which is connected to the network, and also obviously more security and more in aspect of network slicing is another feature that customers are looking for and waiting for network slicing to be a thing in the production network. So I kind of certainly believe that it's a start of a journey for customers, right? Either it's enterprises or end user behavior and how to actually manage end user behavior. So when I talk to customers, AWS customers around cloud journey, there is absolutely a journey for customers who are migrating their workloads to the cloud and understanding what the benefits and functionalities of a public cloud and how they can really leverage more innovation, much faster innovation, and removing that undifferentiated heavy lifting, right? Andy Jassy always talks about that key aspect of customers is to remove that undifferentiated heavy lifting so you can move faster, innovate faster, and deliver the promise of your application, your use cases to your end customer. That's exactly where we are, I think, in the journey of 5G is we are actually transforming into another digital transformation or another digital journey where when I go and talk to customers around, it's not just about coming to the AWS cloud now. Now look at how 5G can tremendously improve the distributedness of your application, not just going into one US East 1 region or US East 2 region in the US. Now you have, working in partnership with tens of different CSPs. Now we have announced partnership in the US with Verizon. You have distributed compute, AWS compute, sitting across 17 locations in Verizon data center close to a 5G mobile network. Think about the art of possibility, combining the power of that 10 gigabit of download speed or even 20 gigabit of download speed and hundreds and hundreds of megabits of upload speed from a 5G network standpoint. 5G as such, combining with the power of compute, edge compute, can dramatically provide more value to the end customer. I totally get it. It's the platform, and it's the platform have to be used for very important use cases, right? I certainly believe there are real use cases today which can be solved by 5G and edge computing. And also we have like very next generational use cases that startups and other enterprises are looking at, especially enterprises where they want to really leverage immersive technology um, for training their work sets, for using immersive technologies, doing remote collaborations in real time, doing like content producers, or they want to be remote these days. COVID has completely changed the way we consume content and distribute content. So there is several different verticals which is going to benefit from this mobility, and that mobility aspect of being provided by the 5G platform, and how we bring about the change of integrating that 5G technology with cloud providers like AWS. And the most important aspect of the thing is, how do we bring about a change in the software architecture, right? One of the most important thing that I talk to customers is, think distributed. Already applications are getting distributed using microservices architecture and things like that, but this is a massive change in the way you're looking at application architecture needing 10 millisecond latency, but application architecture in the same stack looking at 100 millisecond latency, right? So you have to combine the power of cloud and edge compute and embedded compute along with the 5G network, and tremendously look at an application very, very differently in the coming years, and how we develop applications.
Yeah, that's fascinating. I think one of the areas that comes to mind for me on the back of what you just said is machine to machine interactions. They're going to have unique characteristics from what is today a traditional consumer payments, and sort of on the back of that architecture that you describe, we're going to see M2M payments will need to support a much smaller, more frequent transaction processing model with the ubiquitous connectivity that 5G can facilitate. And we're going to see more and more interactions between the machine at a transactional level, at a physical device, and then enabling that to connect into a cloud. And an area that really springs to mind, and we've touched on a little bit today, is relevant to parking and tolls. And we're going to see more of that come together, I think, through autonomous vehicles, connected cars, and those sort of things on the back of what specifically around the M2M space. So I think that's really interesting. And Dan, sorry, I missed you off there. Was there anything from your perspective that you thought worthwhile calling out relative to some of the new opportunities in 5G?
Yeah, I was just going to say basically what you were covering off there, John. I think it when you look at what subscription models have done for businesses, I think now the opportunity to have device initiated payments and what that can do for businesses, I think it's much more practical. And the other thing to think about is 5G actually presents a real opportunity to get rid of wired broadband. And so for businesses having the flexibility of a wireless always on connection, and the flexibility that offers, the low cost that offers, I think that's another opportunity for businesses. But overall, the technology provides a platform for differentiation, and certainly, as you just mentioned, the opportunity for device initiated payments, I think is going to be huge in certain sectors.
Great, thank you. Just on some things to consider, Saravan, and I'm going to direct this question at you if you don't mind, from an AWS vantage point, giving some of the complexities that you just articulated, and that we're seeing generally around some of the journey of 5G and the other aspects associated with it. What's your sort of practical advice to the audience today in relation to 5G? What do you think that we need to keep in mind or start thinking about now? And how do you sort of rationalize that with the journey that we need to kick off on?
Yep. When we talk to customers around why cloud, why public cloud, and we kind of work backwards from customer requirements on what they want to achieve as far as their business goals are concerned, and what is their end state in terms of delivering an application to their end customers or consuming that application to their end customers. From when we work backwards from there, it makes it easy for us to really understand all the aspect of the challenges that the customers are running into, and how do we solve those customer challenges using AWS services or any type of tools that is required for customers to really solve them, right? So the journey starts where customers are saying, as we have a certain bit of applications that is running, say, for example, in an on-prem environment or in a legacy environment, and we would love to go and do digital transformation to that application. And when we work backwards from there and see what are the challenges that the customers are having, then we kind of really help them understand what options do they have in modernizing their application and bringing that applications to the cloud, and really leverage the power of that enormous function of scalability and reliability and security from a cloud standpoint. And once they bring it to the cloud, and then they get the benefit, understand the benefit of the cloud in terms of cost, in terms of operational efficiency, in terms of security, it provides them tremendous opportunity to start looking beyond the infrastructure into the real value of what they are delivering from an application standpoint to their customers. Then they get a lot of opportunity to really innovate much faster, and then start to look at what are the new features and functionalities that they can bring to their end customers. If you extend that conversation with the customers and understand where are the opportunities for you to insert the last mile important aspect of communication, which is 5G. Do you really want to embrace the next generation of connectivity, as you mentioned, machine to machine, lots of payment from device originating from devices? You want to make your end user experience much faster, more seamless, and more reliable and more secure. Like, again, another opportunity to work backwards from customers to look at how these applications are being consumed, where these applications are being consumed, and what are the challenges that they have on the segment of consumer side or on the enterprise side. Dan also mentioned fixed wireless technology, which can actually completely change the game in terms of wired connections going away, and mobile is actually taking over fixed wireless type of architecture. So enterprises are closely looking at it. So what I would recommend is, as you have the digital transformation, as the customers are looking at their digital transformation, some of them are cloud born, right? They're born and developing their solutions completely on cloud. Some of them are in the journey, early part of their journey. Some of them are in the fag end of their journey of cloud computing. Now is the time to really look at how edge computing and 5G can be augmented to their cloud journey. It's not just about taking it and moving to the edge. You're not moving the entire workload to the edge, right? It's a combination of the power of the cloud and combining that with edge, and looking at your application much deeper, and the user behavior of how it is changing, and how 5G is dramatically going to bring more opportunities to rethink your application and deployment strategies and distribution strategies is very key for enterprises. So don't wait for the technology to mature, but start looking at a strategy on how 5G can be a very integral part of your journey towards cloud and journey towards digital transformation.
Fabulous. Thank you for those insights. Appreciate it. To the panel, I'm going to need to come to the conclusion with one final question for each of you, because I need to be respectful of everybody's time. So to wrap up with a final question, what is it that you think that we cannot do today, but we'll be able to do because of 5G? And Nick, my apologies, but I'm going to start with you, if I may.
Hey, no problem. I mean, it's a great question. I think from my point of view, I'll give two. Firstly, I think the metaverse. It's a much talked about concept at the moment, but I think the seamless connectivity and low latency that's offered by 5G technologies is very important to do that. I think on sort of a more practical point of view, I think the other one I would say is we will be able to provide a much more consistent experience to the user using 5G. And I think that's all around tapping some of those advantages we were talking about earlier in terms of personalization, in terms of leveraging sensor data, in terms of understanding that user profile. If you can do all of that effectively, and 5G enables you to do that, you can offer sort of a next level of user experience. So I think sort of ultimately that's it. It will be offering that sort of significantly improved user experience because it will be consistent.
Yes. Thank you, Dan.
Yeah, I would touch on a couple things that we've talked about, but one is making autonomous vehicles actually possible, making that a true reality with smart highways and autonomous vehicles. And I think what we'll see is the commerce, the physical commerce share has migrated first to PCs beginning 25 years ago. Now it's gone to mobile devices, and I do think we're going to see your automobile become, a center of commerce for consumers as we move forward. And the other one I think that becomes possible is just the fixed wireless access that we talked about. And I do think it's possible that 10 years from now you don't see a lot of, if any, wired broadband. It's not required if you have a reliable, cost-effective solution that can provide the capacity and the latency that's required. So I think those are key things that 5G enables.
Thank you. And lastly, Saravan.
Yeah, John, a great question. Certainly, I would believe it's not just about the 5G, to be honest. It's a combination of 5G and the ecosystem that is going to be built around 5G, especially edge computing is a key enabler for a lot of these use cases. I strongly believe that data determines how we live and play the world. When you have billions and billions of devices connected to the 5G network, there's a tremendous amount of data that is going to be generated. Either it is CV2X use cases, machine-to-machine communication, either it's real-time, user experience or whatnot. Combining the power of edge compute, doing real-time data analytics and immersive streaming is going to dramatically change the way 5G is actually doing it today. 4G and edge computing is a thing, but 5G and edge computing is dramatically going to provide us a lot of capabilities, which is some we can see it today, but most of it is going to be pretty new to us.
Fabulous. Thank you. Folks, that's where we're at from a timing perspective. I apologise that we've missed an opportunity to do Q&A due to the time constraints, but we are available to take questions for us in the meeting hub, and you can connect with our team in the exhibition hall as well to cover off any questions that you may have. But forgive us for running slightly. I think I want to sort of finish where we started, and that is that certainly I hope that you see that the impacts from 5G seem all but a certainty from our perspective, and the change will be significant in the way information moves, how much information is actually moving, how we're connecting to one another, and the idea of a transaction is going to change. The definition of a partnership is certainly going to change as the ecosystem becomes more broader. And the very different definition of networks, I think to the point that Saravan made before, and how that operates extensively across multiple components is going to change on the back of 5G. So I'll leave it there for today by thanking you all for attending again. I want to sincerely thank the panelists for their contribution to the debate and the discussion. I hope that everyone's gained some valuable insights into the strategic approaches to addressing the 5G game. And we're now going to take a 10-minute break before the breakout sessions kick off. So with that, I'll wish you all the very best, and thank you again for your interest, support, and engagement with Transaction Network Services. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.